Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, September 6th. A lot to talk about again this morning. We have a very active tropical scene. We certainly still have the threat from Hurricane Florence along the U.S. East Coast. If, in fact, it has an impact on the East Coast, it would come most likely in the middle to latter part of next week. Meanwhile, in the shorter term, we have to deal with the remains of Gordon. Tropical storm Gordon came ashore early yesterday. It's now a tropical depression, but it has left over a lot of moisture that will combine with a frontal boundary zone over the next several days and produce a wide swath of heavy rainfall from the south-central U.S. into the mid-Atlantic region. There can be some rainfall in the mid-Atlantic region anytime from tonight through Monday of next week, and some of that rain can be heavy at times. That's the last thing we would need if, in fact, we do get some additional rainfall later next week or weekend from Hurricane Florence, and that scenario is on the table. Beyond Florence, there is yet another tropical system. It looks like it may take more of a southern route than Florence, and we certainly may have to deal with that after Florence has an impact or not latter part of next week into the weekend. So a lot going on. 3 different systems here to monitor. Let's take a look at the current location of all of these systems. First of all, Gordon sitting and very slow moving right here over the south central U.S. It came ashore early yesterday in the Alabama-Mississippi border region, moving to the north and west, basically just drifting right now. Eventually, it'll start to turn to the north and then the northeast and go in this direction, probably accelerating too over the weekend. And again, it'll contribute to some heavy rainfall in the mid-Atlantic region, combined with a strong cool frontal system. That front arrives tonight, most likely with scattered showers and thunderstorms in the I-95 corridor. It then will stall out just to the south, as has been the case all summer long with stalled out frontal systems very close to the I-95 corridor. And again, Gordon's remains will combine with that frontal system to produce some rainfall in the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday time period. Meanwhile, Florence continues to move to the north and west in this direction right now. It is a major hurricane, Category 3. Very well could fluctuate between major hurricane status and non-major status, dropping down to a Category 2, perhaps even a Category 1 over the next few days. And again, we'll talk about the players on the field, but it remains a big threat for the U.S. East Coast for the middle or latter part of next week. Beyond that, yet another system out here in the eastern Atlantic. It looks like that'll take more of a southern route and head in this direction, and perhaps by next weekend be somewhere in this location, and then we'll have to watch that one as it could turn towards the southeast U.S. And here's a colorized image look at these 3 separate systems right now. Again, Gordon downgraded to a tropical depression, sitting right in this region right here. A lot of moisture, and here is that frontal boundary zone right in here. This is driving to the south and east in this fashion. It'll basically stall out in this region right here, and Gordon's remains will end up moving to the north and east and certainly interact with this frontal system. What it'll tend to do is, as Gordon moves across the eastern Great Lakes Sunday, Monday time frame, it'll kind of merge with this front and draw it to the north, and that could result in some heavy rainfall in the I-95 corridor in the Sunday, perhaps Monday time frame, and we'll have some frontal boundary zone showers and thunderstorms from tonight into the middle and latter part of the weekend. So again, a wet stretch of weather starting to looks like it'll set up tonight and last right through the early part of next week, with the combination of this front headed our way and the remains of what was once tropical storm Gordon. Meanwhile, out over the central Atlantic, Florence has weakened a little bit in the past 12 hours or so, still holding on to Category 3 major hurricane status. That could very well change today down to Category 2 or even a Category 1 over the next couple of days. It continues to move on a west-northwest track, and we'll see the players involved with its eventual storm track over the next few minutes. And meanwhile, to the south and east of Florence, yet another tropical system. That is still unnamed. It looks like it'll take more of a southern route in this direction, and perhaps by next weekend or so be right around this region right in here. And the big concern is that we have high pressure ridging setting up right over the southeastern Canada and northwestern part of the Atlantic, and that will allow for the possibility of Florence to head towards the U.S. East Coast and perhaps even this system, but that is way, way down the road. Well, let's take a look at some forecast maps for the movement of Gordon. Again, not too different amongst the ensemble runs of the European model from last night. Ensemble runs, basically there's a series of runs that are made with slightly different initial conditions. Perhaps one has a little bit more moisture, one has a little bit more heat, one is a little bit cooler. And the benefit to the weather forecaster is that if all the ensemble runs tend to say the same thing, you have higher and higher confidence in that particular forecast. However, if the ensemble runs are spread out all over the place with a storm track, for example, that lowers your confidence in that forecast. Well, for Gordon, pretty set in stone here in the as far as the storm track for the remains of Gordon. It is, again, right over the south central U.S. Just kind of meanders over the next 24 hours or so, then starts to turn to the north, and pretty much in agreement here with all the European model ensemble runs that it moves in this fashion over the next several days. Again, even from this position, it could have an impact on the I-95 corridor. There'll be that stalled out frontal boundary zone just to the south and east, and once Gordon moves on by to the north and west, it'll tend to push that front back to the north as a warm front early next week, and that could result in some heavy rainfall in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City in the Monday time frame, maybe late Sunday, Monday, perhaps even into Tuesday time frame. So again, ensemble runs pretty much in agreement on the track of the remains of Gordon over the next several days, and it will contribute to a swath of heavy rainfall. In fact, let's take a look at that right now. And here we go. This is the rainfall amounts, the total rainfall amounts predicted by NOAA's forecasters for the next 5 days, and it shows pretty much what Gordon will do. It is situated right now in this region, and it's going to take this kind of a track over the next several days, and there's a swath of heavy rainfall that extends over the next 5 days from the south central U.S. into the mid-Atlantic region. Again, it's not alone in this. It's part of all the players on the field, and another major player is that frontal boundary zone that stalls out in this region right here by the weekend, and then turns north as a warm front early next week. Well, let's now turn our attention to Hurricane Florence. This is still several days away, will not have any impact on land right through the early part of next week, but there is a concern, certainly still an ongoing concern, that it could impact the U.S. East Coast during the middle and latter part of next week. This is the ensemble storm track forecast map from the European model for Florence. A couple of things to point out here. First of all, notice as compared to what we just saw with Gordon, still a wide spread, a wide variation. That lowers the confidence. And of course, this is more of a medium and longer term compared to Gordon, so it's not surprising. The black here represents the mean of all the ensemble runs, and it still has the possibility of Gordon turning away before ever making an impact on the U.S. East Coast. However, the blue here represents the operational, sometimes referred to as a deterministic forecast, basically the operational run of the European model last night. That, of course, looks like it brings it right into the Carolinas, and still threat, especially in this region right here, for a direct hit by Hurricane Florence sometime in the middle or latter part of next week. These particular ensemble storm track maps, by the way, from weatherbell.com. Well, let's talk about all the players on the field, and again, we're looking at the 500 millibar height forecast maps from the ensemble run of the GFS last night at 6Z. High pressure ridging to the north over southeastern Canada this time of the year raises red flags because it basically allows for tropical systems to move from the east to the west in the southwestern Atlantic right towards the southeastern U.S. or the Gulf of Mexico or Florida. We have a setup right now with high pressure ridging, and really that allowed Gordon to move in this fashion across the Keys of Florida into the north central Gulf, and now situated right here in the south central part of the U.S. But let's move forward here and look at what happens. This, by the way, is a reflection of Florence right now over the central Atlantic. This particular high pressure ridge is pretty much erased over the next few days by this advancing trough, a vigorous upper level trough over eastern Canada by the early part of the weekend. And there was hope, and there still is a small chance that this trough will pull Florence to the north and northeast into the open North Atlantic without ever having an impact on the U.S. East Coast. That is still a chance, but the odds are against it right now. See what happens right here with the ensemble run of the GFS here now. Here we are by Sunday, and there is that trough. Meanwhile, Florence seems to be left behind, just a little too far to the south to be absorbed or pulled to the north by that trough. Now, once that trough moves on by, we have Florence still sitting here by early next week. This ridge is the main player here. It's a very strong ridge rebuilding in the southeastern part of Canada across the northwestern Atlantic. And this is the red flag for Florence, perhaps coming all the way to the west coast, and perhaps even that following system that's to the south and east of Florence right now. Let's move forward here. And here we go. It's just a very impressively strong ridge by about Tuesday of next week. That could, again, allow for Florence to move towards the U.S. East Coast. There's still a chance it turns away at the last minute. It's still several days away, not set in stone by any means here. We're talking a week down the road now, but this certainly raises that red flag if indeed Florence is left behind by that weekend trough, and there are increasing signs that it will be left behind. Let's move forward a couple more days here, and here we are now, Wednesday of next week. Just a tremendous high pressure ridge, higher heights than normal set up over eastern part of Canada, and here is Florence again. If it were indeed to impact the U.S. East Coast, it would probably be in the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe Saturday time frame during the second half of next week. Well, let's walk through the surface forecast maps from the 6Z GFS model run. We have this frontal boundary zone, this all-important frontal boundary zone, starting to drop slowly to the south and east. An isolated shower or thunderstorm this afternoon. One more uncomfortably hot and humid day. By the way, Philadelphia broke a record yesterday with 95 degrees, breaking the old record of 92 degrees. Expect the low to mid-90s again this afternoon. Only an isolated shower or thunderstorm this afternoon. But then by the time we get into the early evening, there will be a little bit more numerous showers and thunderstorms. Still on the scattered side of activity here. Again, evening scattered showers and thunderstorms as that cool front arrives. Then, as we get into the day on Friday, high pressure starts to build to the north. Our low-level winds turn to the northeast, and it brings in cooler air, noticeably cool in Philadelphia, New York, certainly on Friday, with temperatures confined to the 70s. Still may make the 80s in D.C., but certainly not as warm as today. And by the weekend, we're all in the 70s in the I-95 corridor region. That front just stalls out, as has been the case all summer long, resulting in numerous rounds of showers and thunderstorms. Here we are Saturday morning, strong high pressure to the north, a cool weekend, a downright cool weekend for D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City with an east to northeast flow. Occasional showers with that frontal boundary zone, maybe an embedded thunderstorm or two. Meanwhile, out over the south central U.S., this is about the time, Saturday morning, where the remains of Gordon will start to make a turn to the north and then northeast. And here we go. Let's advance into the early part of Sunday now. Strong high pressure to the north. Kind of like a wintertime situation where you have moisture flowing up and over, cool air at the surface associated with a New England high or a southeastern Canada high. Here are the remains of Gordon. That frontal boundary zone will start off the day on Sunday south of D.C., but it'll start to turn to the north as Gordon's remains slide to the north and west of the I-95 corridor. By the time Monday rolls around, we may have a warm front producing some rainfall here in the mid-Atlantic region. Again, that could be heavy at times early next week, associated with the front advancing back to the north, Gordon pushing off to the north and east across the eastern Great Lakes. And then we'll have to watch and worry about Florence. This is the 6E GFS model that keeps Florence basically, let's move it out over here, it keeps Florence a little bit to the east. And again, it is at this point, that particular run did not impact the U.S. East Coast, but that certainly still remains a concern. Well, one final map I'd like to show, because this is an important player as well, the sea surface temperatures out across the Atlantic Ocean. Florence right now is headed into a region right around in this area right here where it's transitioning from colder than normal waters to near normal, and soon it'll be out over warmer than normal waters, and that is of course a favorable factor for intensification. It may weaken some over the next 12, 24, maybe even 48 hours or so, but once it gets back out over these very warm waters over the western Atlantic, it's likely to intensify, and this whole area in here helps to pump up that upper level ridge as well. So this is a big factor, the fact the waters are so warm off the eastern seaboard. That does two things. It'll do two things down the road. It'll help to intensify Florence as it gets closer and closer to the East Coast, and it'll help to pump up that all-important ridge in the upper levels of the atmosphere across southeastern Canada, the northwestern part of the Atlantic during the early part of next week. So a lot going on. Don't dismiss Gordon's contribution to some heavy rainfall. That's a big factor here over the next several days, a potential for some heavy rainfall on top of course, very well saturated grounds. If in fact Florence has an impact on the East Coast, it's liable to be the middle or latter part of next week. That's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.